Yeah, this is one thing. If you don't get this sign that the thing is being recorded, and I start teaching, you remind me, then I'll get it recorded and ensure that you all see it later. Okay, so so just now I've just pulled up the what I had sent you, and fortunately, quite a large number of you have replied. I didn't count, but fairly large number have replied. And what I could get from all of that is that 1, 2, 3, everybody seemed to be very comfortable. It was A. If I make a mistake in my memory, remind me again. But 1, 2, 3, everybody was very comfortable. They're familiar with the terminology, with the notation and all that. With 4, there were a couple of people who wrote that they're not heard about odd numbers in the way I have written, or they may not have heard about odd numbers having also negative number. So probably they seen only even odd, only positive odd numbers. So 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So let me share again that this is a convention which may vary from book to book or author to author. So I had written positive even numbers. Likewise, if you just say even numbers, some books will just write what I have written as 2, 4, 6, 8, and someone may also include -2, -4. Where to include 0 or not in even numbers can again be a question which may vary from place to place. Okay. Whenever these things will matter, I will be very precise and write down. If there is a confusion, ask me. Okay. But it's after all, -3 is also odd number. Okay, because it's a multiple of, I mean, it's integer and not divisible by 2, but divisible by 3. So divisibility, again, whether you define it for negative numbers or not, can be a question mark in somebody's mind. But it's convenient to use this also as a differentiable. I mean, you know, -3 is divisible by 3, and the result is -1. And once we use that convention, -3 is also an odd integer. Okay, so we'll try to stick to this. Now, with 5, most people said they're comfortable, and maybe 1 or 2 may have raised some question, but minor. So one point which I have written as a recall with the red thing is that usually when we write complement, we must have what is our reference set, or also called universal set. It should be understood from the context, from the question, or from the theme that we are studying, and so on and so forth. If not, you can ask. I'll try to be precise when I write it. Okay. So generally, when we write the expression like A intersection B complement is A complement union B complement, is understood that there is a certain universal set which has been agreed upon and is fixed, and A and B are then subsets of that universal set. Okay, and so if this reference set is Z, namely set of all integers, then A complement is all A which are in Z but not in A. So if our complement, if our universal set was just positive integers, then A complement will differ. Okay, so A complement definitely depends on not just A, but what is the reference set that we are keeping in mind, and it is usually understood from the context. Okay, with 6, I didn't see anybody raising question. With 6, if I'm wrong and if somebody has written something, please point out to me. I had read all these and I have compiled my mind, not written down anywhere. 7 and 8, there were some questions. Some had written that they had not seen this kind of usage. Somebody had asked whether the same thing continues to be true if I and j are not just part of 1 to k, but let's say all integers or all positive integers or all natural numbers. So first of all, yes, if I and j belong to set of all integers or positive integers or non-natural numbers, yes, this is still valid. So if the understanding is that if you have a universal set, it has been put in several subsets and all of them are mutually disjoint. So AI intersection AJ is null for I not equal to j, means it's called mutually disjoint. So AI intersection AJ, for any two of them, they have no element in common, and all of them put together, if that you get the universal set in mind, then this is called a partition. Partition can be finitely many, or it could be the set of all integers or positive integers, etc. These are called countable sets. Later we will talk about countable and then go beyond that, but for now let us just stick to that. Okay. Number 8, quite a few people had raised questions of the first kind, that is it true for countably many or all integers or all positive integers, etc. And some had written that we had not seen this terminologies, we had not seen this notation, etc. Okay, so while you did geometric series or series in general, you would have seen summation I equal to 1 to infinity, and or I equal to 1 to n, and therefore this terminal, this first one here, union going from 1 to k, you would have been comfortable with. And if you allow it to be all natural numbers, then I equal to 1 to infinity will also be familiar with. In the 8th one, a few things have changed. Okay. Firstly, A and B, C and D are two sets which have no element in common. C intersection D is empty. Okay, disjoint sets. Okay. We are not saying that their union is U. No. Okay. Okay. No, here I am saying that the union is the whole thing. Yes. C union D is 1 to k. So the union is U. So even this we can. So we have taken some elements out of the all k of them, and their union is I should have given a correction here. It's not implied in the way I have written. I'll send you the corrected version. So C should be union of some of them and D should be union of some of them. That is not implied by what I have written. Okay. So the indexing set 1 to k itself is bifurcated into two groups. C is union of A is in first one, and no, sorry. Yeah, so C and D are subsets of the indexing set. And together they are indexing all of them in our mind. Then you take union of AI over few of them, okay, their complement. Is union of AI over the rest of them. So you think about it like this. Let's take k to be 10, and we have taken C to be odd integers out of 1 to 10 and D to be even integers 1 to 10. So then the first one is union of AI, I in odd numbers. So A1, A3, A5, A7, A9. You take their union, their complement, well, complement of all of them is U. So their complement is the ones in the sets which are not being used. So A2, A4, A6, A8, A10. But and union of them is precisely the second part. Okay. So The notation is correct. Just now my reading and comprehending them was the problem, but this is correct. Yeah. So the main point. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you said ij can be any number from the natural number set. So what if we take ij to be infinitely large? So we know that ij are bounded by the number k. So we can't take infinitely large the value of I and j.
No. Wait. What I said was that this 1 to k can be replaced by the natural numbers. Okay. Do you see what I said? That in number 7, I had given for all ij in 1 to k, right? So this 1 to k can be replaced by 1 to ... That is the set of natural numbers. Now ij can be very large. And then the answer would be, this one can be union from I equal to 1 to infinity ai equal to u.
But sir, a universal set cannot have infinite partition now.
No, it's a matter of convention. Okay. Some people will restrict partition only to be finite one. Some people can allow a partition to be infinite one, but we'll say that. So whereas if it is only finite, you'll say it's a finite partition. Okay. So you may not have seen a notion of partition being used for an infinite set, but yes, you can have a infinitely many things which are taken as partition also. Okay.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. So yeah. So the main point is that we should have fixed what is the universal set, then we should have fixed what is our indexing set. So ij belonging to this 1 to k, that is the indexing set 1 to k. The indexing set could have been this, could have been set of all natural numbers. And in the second case also the result is true, except here we'll have to then write I equal to 1 to k. Now, this notation you are familiar with, but going from 7 to 8, another thing which is tricky, which has changed, which you may not have been familiar with, is earlier we were summing over I equal to 1 to k. Now I am summing over I belongs to a set. Okay. So this notation, summation over union over I equal to 1 to k, is same as union over I belonging to this set 1 to k. Okay. So this union I in C means you take what are the elements in C and you add them one by one. Okay. So this is in a sense more convenient notation. Okay. Except that there is one difference in usage. Okay. When you write some union I equal to 1 to k, you are saying you are going to be taking union in that order: I equal to 1, I equal to 2, I equal to 3, I equal to k. Whereas here no order is specified, because a set only has elements. There is no order implied when you write a set. Okay. So if the set was 1, 5, 7, you can first start 7, then 5, then 1, you can, and vice versa. It makes no difference, but there is a for the current discussion, if there are finitely many, the ordering doesn't count. In any case, when you are taking unions, the ordering doesn't count. Can anyone think about a place where you have used I equal to 1 to infinity kind of a notation, but the ordering plays a role?
Cartesian product. Like infinite Cartesian product.
Yeah, but if you, whatever you are deriving out of that, if everywhere you change the notation, it will still not make a difference. Okay, in a sense. But something very substantive, which actually may no longer be true if you do not, if you take away the way you are summing up the index.
So a sequence
So when we write a sequence compact notation, we write A and n equals 1 to infinity, and there the order actually makes a difference.
Well, actually, this is not correct. For a sequence, it will not make any difference whatsoever.
Well, I can think of a series, like the alternating harmonic series. It's conditionally converted to something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
So if we take summation AI AJ, I mean AI plus 1, and
just wait 1 minute. The earlier comment about series and conditionally convergent series. Yes, that is the correct point, and rightly said so. That if you have a summation, alternating series with 1 by n, 1 minus half plus 1/3 minus etc., then you would have done it that the summation depends on the order in which you are summing, and that is where summation I equal to 1 to infinity is correct, that it is convergent, but writing union over I belonging to positive integers or natural numbers AI may no longer be correct. Okay. So, so you have got the point that there is a difference in the two notation, and one has to be aware of that. So that is correct. Now, what was it that you were saying subsequently? Whoever was saying subsequently when I said to wait?
Sir, I was saying summation AI AJ, and if we specify an order on I and J, I mean, we do not consider all the pairs of natural number. I mean, we just induce a relation between I and J, and then if we do not maintain the order, the sum actually does not make sense. So I mean, I'm not being able to make it precise, but
no, but you never write IJ and then summation AIJ. No. Then you have to put it notationally somewhat differently. Okay. So can you say again what is the thing that you are saying will not be correct? AIJ meaning?
Sir, I am saying summation AI into AJ.
Summation AI
I
into
and
AJ.
J. Yes, sir.
And yet
I
summing
mean,
over and summing over.
Sir, I mean, I and J are the indexes. Sir, I am not being able to make it precise. Sir, there's a mistake.
Yeah. If you write summation over AI, one summation over I, another summation over J, AI, AJ, and there are finitely many ones, the ordering will not matter. If they're all positive, again, ordering will not matter. But if they're positive, negative, both combination, then bets are off. Ordering will matter.
So I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Regarding the previous one which you mentioned, the conditional ordering thing. So even in that case, can't we like define whether I is odd or even, and that would determine positive or negative? So then
no. Odd, even if you change the ordering only amongst odd and you change the ordering only amongst even, then the summation will change.
So can you give an example? So for example, when you said 1 plus 1 minus half plus 1/3, something like that.
Oh,
so if it's
no, keep the an to be minus 1 to the power n, 1 over n. Okay, but suppose among the positive ones, you keep the same order, just 2, 4, 6, etc. In the odd ones, you tweak the ordering. Okay, then the summation, the total value will change. Whether it will converge or not will change, we have to worry about, but the value can certainly change.
So but won't the individual terms in each case remain the same? Like the terms that you saw?
They are both infinity. Summation over positive ones and summation over negative ones. Right?
So we can't prove that they'll converge.
Yeah, it may not. You cannot prove. You can always do a reordering such that they will not converge.
Okay? That is what the sequence that will not absolutely converge.
Sorry, the voice is breaking a little. If I cannot hear you, maybe you can put it on chat. But try again.
Yes, I meant like it is absolutely convergent. If it is not absolutely convergent, that is conditionally convergent, then there is always a rearrangement that the sum will not converge, and there is also a rearrangement that the sum will converge.
Yes, but may converge to a different value.
Yes.
Actually, I
Sir,
think there's even a stronger statement than that, right? Where any real value you can arrange the
Yes.
terms in such a way that it'll converge to those.
Correct,
Right.
correct.
So,
Correct.
sir, in case of Wallis product, the same also happens. Like
Sorry.
1 by,
In,
in case of Wallis product, 1
I
by
don't
2
know what
into
is
2.
Wallis product. So let's, yeah, it may happen. I don't know what is Wallis product. So the main point is that I wanted to right now draw your attention was that the notation used in 7 and notation used in 8, for unions, it doesn't make any difference ordering. But when we are taking series summation, it makes a difference. And you have got it correctly. At least some of you have got it correctly and have said so. Others would have heard that also. So if there is any confusion, let me know. But in fact, I will add that the first form of notation, summation I equal to 1 to union or summation I equal to 1 to infinity, has been what is the traditional way. And they looked at series only in that way. It was only later that people pointed out all this conditional, absolute, etc., etc. And then there are some who do not like this notation at all. They want everything to be used only in the way it is defined in 8. Okay.
Sir, are there no situations where this union ordering matters in union? Because suppose, for example, we take this progressive union, suppose closed interval 0 to 1 by n, then 0 to 1 by n minus 1, this way, like it's progressing in a certain way. This union I'm taking, so here I think, I mean, I feel that ordering should matter.
No, ordering will not matter. So what is the set of n's for which you are taking this? N equal to 1 to infinity.
Yes.
And you are taking 0 to 1 minus 1 over n.
Yes.
Okay. So what is their union? It is closed at 0, open at 1, right?
Yes, yes, sir.
And whichever ordering you take this, it will remain the same. You can prove it very easily.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is universally true, like for this never matters in case of unions.
In case of union, the ordering does not matter. Yes. Okay. So all right, now I'm going to, for a minute, stop share. I'm going to go to my iPad now.
Professor, just one more thing I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Ordering would not matter for intersections as well, right? I just wanted to confirm.
Ordering will not mind for intersection as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. 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 Please always feel free to ask. Okay. And deliberately. So the normal class in CMI is usually 2 sessions of this length, 1 hour 15 minutes. As of course Professor Krishna said so yesterday's discussion also, but with the purpose I have put 3, that you should not feel that we are losing time because you are asking questions. No, we have put extra 3 sessions in every week. Part of it is also because I may be taking longer time given my health issues, but beyond that, feel free to ask me questions. And if we finish, if I, after 2 or 3 weeks, if I see that I am going faster, I will ask more questions. I'll make you ask more questions. Okay, so one on the chat box, if we take the infinite alternating series of 1 minus 1, won't ordering matter?
Sir, I mean, if we take the summation minus 1 to the power n, and if we write n in the specific order of 1 to infinity, and in other case, just n is an element of natural number, then, I mean, as the set is infinite, I mean, if it is finite, then we know that there are equal number of 1 and minus 1, or that does not matter. But if it is infinite, then in the matter of representation, won't that differ if we do not maintain the ordering?
No. But So you are taking unions or summation? First, let's understand that.
Sir, summation.
Summation. So even with the ordering, this doesn't converge, right?
Yes, sir. It
So it
doesn't
is not
converge.
converging. That's all. It is not meaningful.
Okay,
Right.
okay, sir.
So it doesn't
Okay.
change. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So it just doesn't converge. Yeah. So yeah, while you were talking about this, I wanted to ask you, how many of you have heard the name Terence Tao? Anyone?
Yes, sir. Of course.
Yes, sir.
Good. Okay. So Fields medalist, much younger than me, I must add. Okay. And someone who has been to India. I've met him. I have also met him on meetings, etc. And he is very prolific writer, prolific mathematician. So years ago, and by this years, I guess it is maybe soon after he got his Fields medal, maybe, but he had taught a course on analysis, perhaps, and he had written very detailed and very good lecture notes, which are on his website. Okay. And some of us in those days, I used to be in ISI Delhi. I was teaching at ISI, faculty at ISI Delhi for like 22 years. So. And we had come out with a series of books written, published in India, available, good quality books, which is available at a reasonable price to, especially to Indian students, called from Hindustan Book Agency. And it's called TRIM series. You would have seen, hopefully, some books in that series. But I think there are at least 75 books in that series. So we were always looking for good books. So one of our colleagues who was in that, he wrote to Terence Tao that you have put your book on your website, but can we also, not all, this is 20 years ago, so not everybody was accessing emails or website, this thing accessing was not that common among students. So he wrote that, can we print your book in this series? So Terence Tao's answer was, as long as you don't ask me to edit out something, you want to change something, you change. You see there is some error, you change, your responsibility is yours. You can. So the book is also there in the HBA series anyway, but it is there on Terence Tao's website. Interestingly, he doesn't talk of conditional convergence, etc., etc. His sum of an infinite series is unconditional, always just summation I belonging to the index set only. The first one, then he gives a special thing that if you are doing this, then this, etc., etc. So in the way he works, he thinks about it. It is only the union over I in the indexing set AI. That's it. And maybe in years to come, the first will vanish and eventually only the second one will stay. Okay, but right now we are in a crossroads. So most books will write summation I equal to 1 to infinity, whereas some will use only summation I belonging to the indexing set. Okay. All right. So thought I had put that blank space here, but give me a minute. I have been in the meanwhile, somebody wants to ask something, they can ask. I can answer while I'm still trying to figure out what needs to be done at my end. But
sir, I don't have a question, but you can just create a new note in Apple Notes and start writing, if that's what you want. Yeah, but no, there is a reason I am doing this, but okay, I have searched that now. And
All right. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask who our TAs were for analysis 1.
Oh yeah, the list of TAs they have told me, but I have forgotten the names. But we'll ask. I will get their email IDs and then send you all the names and email IDs, the TAs.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. Right now we are having 4, and we are wondering whether we should expand that to 6. But we'll in another 2 days you should get. Okay.
Okay.
Certainly by Friday session. Tomorrow you may not get, but by Friday session, if you haven't got it, alert me the first thing, and then I'll ensure that you get it. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So you have already had a algebra class, right? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Was it yesterday or today?
Yesterday.
Huh?
Yesterday, sir.
Okay. And you have got the TS for algebra?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, all right. So we should get the TS by Friday for sure. I'll probably before that. Okay. All right. So now let us move away from the questions I had sent you, and you all would have seen the set of you use greatest common divisor or HCF as in highest common factor?
GCD.
Yeah. So when I was a student, so I'm now going back 50 years ago, we had the GCD I had never heard. We always used HCF. And so whenever I taught, I would always continue to say HCF, and students could make out, though they had moved on to GCD, they could understand HCF. Till about 10 years ago, then one batch student said, "Sir, what is HCF?" Because they had not heard, some students had not heard HCF, and then I moved to GCD. So this is interesting how even terminology changes over time. So, okay. All right. So, now I have my memory problem. What is this set called? I'm just lost that name of this set.
Set of rational numbers.
Huh?
Rational numbers.
Set of rational numbers.
I could not hear you.
Rational numbers.
Rational numbers. Yeah. So this is unbelievable that if 6 months ago somebody had said that I will have forgotten the word rational number. I'm not forgotten. But during the summer, I had a severe illness. I'm glad that I'm back. But just as I started writing, the word rational slipped my mind and I could not recall. So I will ask you such things also. Okay. So it's not that I don't know. It's just that the word is a problem. So you would have seen the rational numbers, and I guess some of, perhaps all of you or some of you have the square root of 2 is not a rational number. And some of you would have even seen a proof. Some of you may have only seen a statement. Right? So this is a history which goes back ages. It goes back maybe 2,500 years, even more. That numbers, how they came, first people thought of integers, then rationals, because you wanted to take how many parts, this, that, some practical computations they needed to do. They had to say half. You have some object, half you will share. So they had to come up with the number half, 1/3, and from then on, generally P by Q. And then somebody discovered that they always talked about square root 2 also. But then somebody discovered that square root of 2 cannot be a rational number like p by q. And now there is that easy. I mean, what is this then? But of course, square root of 2 can be, why would they need it? One reason they will need it is like, this doesn't look like a right angle triangle. Leave alone, but assume that this looks like a right angle triangle. If both these are 1, then the length of this diagonal is square root 2. This also was known. But then square root 2 is not a rational number. If these are the only numbers you talk about, then you are in trouble. What is square root 2? You can draw a thing. You say it has a length, but it is not a number as per your liking or as per your thinking. So in those days, and it continued at least till 200 years ago and more, that what is a number, what is the length of an object, what is an area of an object, these were kind of taken for granted or self-evident truth. You didn't need, there was no need to define anything. It is understood. It was only question was whether you can answer a question or not. You never asked what is it, how is it defined, etc. So they went on that, okay, we need to somehow expand this set and start thinking about something more as sets and so on, as real numbers, etc. Okay. But so we will, so in your algebra class, what was done yesterday?
Sir, vector spaces.
Vector spaces, okay, all right. So for rational numbers, and for A, and if you take two elements of natural numbers, not natural numbers, for A and B in in Q, you can always talk A plus B, right? You can always take sum of two such elements and you get a same kind. Rational numbers, the sum will be always rational, something which is easy to verify. And then A plus B is B plus A and is itself a rational number. Then you add 0 to it, you get the object itself. And then for all A in Q, there exists a D in Q such that A plus D is 0. And then you can call D to be minus A. Okay. These are very elementary facts you can verify yourself once you have what do we mean by this by elements in Q and rational numbers. I'm missing this word again and again. I don't know. Anyway, so now
so additive inverse, you mean?
Sorry?
So, do you mean additive inverse?
Yeah, so this is called additive inverse. So additive inverse is there for elements in Q of rational numbers. And then you also have for AB in there, you also have a product A times B equal to B times A belongs to Q. It's also a rational number. And then perhaps I missed writing the same thing for addition. A plus B plus C is equal to and then multiplicative inverse. Firstly, the element 1 is identity when you take multiplication, and then you also have a multiplicative inverse for all A in Q. A not equal to 0, there exists C such that AC, A dot C is equal to 1. And then C is the multiplicative inverse, we call that to be A inverse. These are notations you would have used in your school days, but now I'm just writing them as a notation, okay? And so this one is called, okay, so I can write that here again. A so this is that this Q is an additive group. So with the operation of addition, this is a group. And if you take away the element 0, then the set of element all the natural numbers minus all the rational numbers minus 0, if you take away the 0 element, then you get that again is a multiplicative group. Okay. And moreover, you have A times B plus C is equal to A times B plus A times C. And since we have already said that, in the order in which you multiply doesn't matter, we don't have to write that again. B plus C times A is equal to B times A plus C times A. That is implied by our earlier observations. Okay. So these things which I have written till now. So originally it's a you have an operation of addition which satisfies this, and addition of multiplication which satisfies this, and this last one is called that the multiplication distributes over the addition. I forget which order it is that this distributes over that or that distributes over that. This is an English phrase which I have forgotten, but product of A and sum of B plus C is same as you take A times B plus A times C. Okay.
The product distributes over sum.
Product distributes over sum, correct. So now these things together, if you have a set, here it was the set of set Q, but it could be any set, and then you have one element which you can call 0, you have one element which you call 1, and then you have two operations plus and dot, and if they collectively satisfy all the conditions you have written down there, then the original collection, that is here the Q, along with these operations is called a field. Okay. And moreover, so right now we have on the set of rational numbers, we have the element 0, we have the element 1, then we have addition, we have multiplication, and then collectively it's a group, it's a field. Now we bring in another thing which is called ordering. Okay, so for A, B in our set Q, we say A less than B if we can write it in any different ways. That we define a positive number. So So if Q was an arbitrary set, then we just say that we have a ordering defined, and when it is a set of rational numbers, then we know what the ordering is defined as B minus A. Then for our example, B minus A is defined, and then that should be positive. So in this, we can say if B minus A is positive. In general, along with these operations, you are given ordering, and it should satisfy this property. So now this is called ordering, and the ordering is called a total order. This is a total order that you've given any two elements A and B. This happens or A equal to B or B is less than equal to. So given any two elements, if one of these three always holds and exactly one of these three always holds, then we say it's a total order. And this is a ordered field. Okay. Yeah. I'm unable to hear. I don't know if others could hear, then they could say what he said, but otherwise you please try again.
Hello.
Yeah. What was the question? Yeah, but audible, but decoding what you are saying is a bit difficult. So,
okay, I'll write it down.
Yeah, please write it down. Yeah. How do you know that a number is positive? Okay. So in the set,
It's a positive. It's a good positive.
Sorry. See, in the set Q, which is we have defined as P by Q, where P was in Z and Q was in N, and there it's GCD is 1. If P is also in N, then it's a positive number. Okay, strictly positive number, and if P equal to 0 is allowed, then it's a is 0. But if it is 0, then it is 0. But I hope you get that answer. And if you are moving out of this rational numbers, then you have to postulate what is your definition of ordering. Okay. All right. So we are going to be talking only about Q, but I'm just making this statement that, you know, why for Q we are writing such complicated expressions, because these complicated expressions have not necessarily only for Q. Whatever we say after this can work with other sets Q also. That is all I'm saying. But if you are moving away from Q, then we have to define how with the ordering is defined there. What do we mean by positive, etc. Okay. So there is one other important property. So it could be one of you. That's why I'm just going to pick up the call. But if it is someone else, I'm going to. Hello. It's a marketing call as expected. So I just discuss. Yeah. So when we have the set of rational numbers, then of course we have the set of natural numbers, namely 1, 2, 3, etc. is the element here, because you can take Q is in P can be in N and Q can be 1. So you already have the set of natural numbers as an element in Q. Okay. More generally, if you move away from this rational numbers, then you anyway have 0 and 1. And on 1, you have a notion of addition. So if you add it several times, any number of times, that can be verified and that can be defined. And therefore, you still have a natural, that is what will be the n in that context. But in this case, we already have n. So the set Q also has another important property, which is that so for every strictly positive element A in Q, there exists a natural number n such that A times n is bigger than 1. I will, somebody has asked a question, Rohit. I will answer that in a minute after I stop what I am trying to say just now. So this can be written in many different ways. If you can divide by n and you can say 1 by n is less than. There exists n such that 1 by n is less than A. Various such frameworks are there, with equivalent ways of defining, but this is called Archimedean property. Okay. So in general, you have Q, you have unit, you have 0, you have 1. 1 is the multiplicative identity, 0 is the additive identity. You take the multiplicative identity and you keep adding it to itself any number of times. Okay. So given an A, you can add the multiplicative identity large number of times first to exceed that. So multiply it, it will exceed that. Okay. So you take any element A which is positive, you can keep adding A to itself because and large number of times you will exceed 1. Okay. So this is called Archimedean property. And you may wonder, why is this important? So Archimedean property was brought in or becomes important for our context is that you see, I told you that if you go back more than 200 years ago, people were not bothered about defining things very precisely, but things which are understood what they mean, that is it, and then you start writing. Okay. So you all would have heard that calculus, I mean, we are not going to do it right away, but derivatives and continuity derivatives, all these things were, especially derivatives, were introduced ages ago by Newton and Leibniz, probably independently. All of you would have heard this, and more or less same, but some differences. And particularly the way Leibniz wrote his arguments and proofs, he had a notion of what he called infinitesimal number. Okay, and one way to describe infinitesimal number is that it's something which does not satisfy this Archimedean property. That you can keep adding to it any number of times and you will never exceed 1. And that is what he called infinitesimal. It is divided into infinitely many parts. Okay, and his proofs were using infinitesimals. Newton didn't quite refute that, but didn't quite use that. He had other way of writing proofs, maybe. All this is historical. We really don't know who did what, but this is what I read. Okay, and so then it was a debate that, you know, whether infinitesimals are to be allowed in our framework or not. And one way to refute that was to say that no, it doesn't satisfy Archimedean property. So there is no infinitesimal number there. And perhaps in this context, the Archimedean principle came into the picture. Of course, Archimedean predated Newton and Leibniz many years ago, and he would have use some arguments which use such a thing. So they quoted him and then continued to call this as an Archimedean principle. Okay. So, so now we have come to a stage that we have noted that the set of natural numbers, sorry, the set of rational numbers is a field which is ordered, which has an order, total order. So totally ordered field, it's a totally ordered field, and it has Archimedean property. So Archimedean totally ordered field is the set of rational numbers is that. Okay. Now, we have talked about that square root 2 is a problem. It cannot be taken with an element in Q, right? So efforts were on to how can we create a new entity where we can add this square root of 2. And people would have tried various things. But then why stop at square root of 2? Why not cube root of 2? Why not cube root of 7? Why not fifth root of 7? And so on and so forth. So you have to somehow bring in square root nth root of m, where n and m are positive integers. Then you have to take their negative values. All that you have to add. So people would have tried this and said, now we have at least our square roots make sense, cube roots make sense, nth root makes sense, etc., etc. Of course, just by adding them, it won't do, because you have to take square root 2 plus square root 3. What do they add, etc., etc. So you have to take all these. You have to add numbers so that all the postulates that we have till now debated work. Okay. So far, so good. But this is not the end. Square root 2 is not the end. You have the circle was an object which had been, again, going back in time to before Archimedean also. So circle, and what is the, if you draw a circle, what is the length of the chord and what is its area? These are also objects which are, these are also questions which have bothered people from that time onwards. Bothered, or they wanted them to understand what they are, to use them for what they are. Okay. And I guess some of you, or maybe all of you, would have heard this bifurcation in mathematics called pure mathematics and applied mathematics, which in my view is all artificial. The most mathematics, till going back few hundred years ago, essentially developed as what may be called applied mathematics, not as pure mathematics. Applied in the sense problem, existing notions were not enough, that they created a new notion. Okay. That is how all kinds of mathematical ideas took shape, in my view. Okay, and so you came up with, so people came up with trigonometry, sine and cosine. In mathematics, there is again a lot of debate going on about Vedic mathematics and this and that, and people don't know what they're talking about and what they claim. But I dismiss all that. But at the same time, what cannot be dismissed, there is enough evidence now available that, for example, the function, sine function, okay, was actually first initiated in India. It was not called sine. Those who also try to learn some of the Indian history or mathematics they were taught in school in other languages, they might have come up with this thing, ja, as a phrase for, or g or ja as a, what is the function, sine function. Okay, and you see, if you go back hundreds of years, people were interested in the motion of the sun and the moon, and based on that come out with various things about the weather. Okay, and for that they needed the sine function was, so somebody has written ya in Hindi. So is it written as ya or ja? What were you taught? Ya or ja? So from historians, and this is a historian, I'll remember her name in a few minutes, a woman. She has visited CMI several times and given lectures on it at CMI. She's an American who got interested in Indian mathematics for very strange reason. She was a math student at Brown University in US. And in US, in addition to the courses that you are doing with, let's say, mathematics and physics and so on and so forth, you can take additional courses. And suddenly she attended a course in Sanskrit. And in that course, they talked about how mathematics was written in Sanskrit ages ago. And that caught her interest, and now she's an expert on Indian mathematical history. Okay, so much so that she was an invited speaker as at ICM, the International Congress of Mathematicians, held in India in 2010. So you have to be highly acceptable in mathematics circles to be given an honor of being invited to speak at ICM. Anyway, Kim Flopker is her name. And in one of her lectures, she says that now it is well understood and accepted that the origin of trigonometry is in India in solving these questions about weather and so on and so forth. And so the sign, she says that the origin, they've gone to what they call in languages. I mean, what is the origin of the word ja? So the bow and arrow. So bow is called jiva in Sanskrit, and according to her, the ja came out of jiva. And in some drawings, if you draw, you take a circle and you draw a chord, small, close to the end, not to the center. Then one side of it looks like like a bow. And she says that perhaps that is the origin of ja and jiva. And she says that this thoughts went from India to the Arab world, and from there to the Western world, Europe. And so the Arabs were using their own phrase for eco. So perhaps what they mean by jiva, so in Arabic, and when that went to the Western world, they took that as the name, and they tried to get a corresponding name in whichever language they were working with them, perhaps Roman or whatever. And that is where the word sign came. Come what it may, but the word sign was here, and lot of mathematics likewise has arisen out of the need to solve a problem of interest at that point. Okay. And why did I come to this? Yeah. So since they could not so the area of a circle or the length of the arc, they could not put it as a rational number. Even if you have added square roots and cube roots and all these roots, it is still not one of them. That is where the number pi came out. Okay, and pi itself has a huge history, and how to approximate. So this notion of approximately calculating pi without defining pi goes back to those times. And since our time is almost up, I'll just end it by saying that we want to now move to a framework. You come up with, expand this set of rational numbers to another group, add numbers to that, so that we reach a stage where you have a totally ordered field, Archimedean totally ordered field with some additional properties. Okay, And that is what we are going to talk as the real numbers, and that is what our starting point will be. We will not construct them. The construction of real numbers will happen in your second course. But first, before we spend, it may take several lectures to construct properly, but to construct, you'll wonder, why are we doing all this? Don't we know all this? So that's why in the first semester, the way we do it at CMI, we will be taking that as we'll just write down as axioms of real numbers, move on from that, and then construct. Okay. Somebody has to ask a question?
Sir, one question. It's a bit generic, like if a field where zeros are getting added to one, that is characteristic something non-zero, then does the Archimedean property hold?
I will not get into that. In this course, we will not even think about such things. Okay, we will be only talking about this. Okay, you can ask your algebra teacher that question. Part of the reason is I don't have the answer at my fingertips either, because I don't work in algebra. I am an analyst and probabilist, etc. So given my difficulties, I might take a few minutes to answer your question. So let's pass that. Okay. I will end this with one interesting anecdote. So he said that pi is not a rational number. Okay. So I'm sure several of you, if not all of you, would have heard this phrase rational number, that pi is not a rational, pi is the area of a unit circle, etc., etc. And but at the same time, rational numbers as p by q, etc. So in one interview, I forget, while I was still in ISI, whether it was for ISI entrance, for PhD, or for masters, or some NBHM internship, etc., etc. There was, at one interview, we asked the student, what is a rational number? And the interesting answer, at that time we said, what nonsense. But later, we didn't give him zero, we didn't throw him out, because we could rationalize what exactly went in his mind. So the answer given was integers of the form p by q, where p and q are natural numbers, are rational, except when p equal to 22 and q equal to 7. We were all very angry with the student at that time. But what nonsense. P by q is a rational number. Why is it ruling out p equal to 22? We could make out that it's connecting it with pi, but we know pi is not 22 by 7, but it's only an approximation. So why is it doing that? Later we realized that he was trying to make sense out of a few things which have been taught to him by different teachers. What is a rational number? P by q. The pi is not rational. And yet, at some other course, he has been taught that pi equal to 22 by 7. And how do you make sense of all of them together? It is only by giving this weird an answer. Okay. So remember, somebody gives an absurd answer, you have to give some time to think what is the origin of this absurd answer. If the rest of the questions and the answers, you believe that the person is not stupid, he has understood what he has learned, then why would he give such an answer? You have to come up with the answer for that. And that is why we didn't throw out the student. So last, my math teacher taught p equal to 22 by 7. I couldn't convince her otherwise. Yes. So, thankfully, any of the Indian Vedas or things which were written at that time don't talk about pi and don't give it a value. But the Bible gives a value, I think 22 by 7 or 3.14. One of these two values is mentioned for pi in Bible. Now in US, firstly, various states, each state draws its own laws. There is no national thing. It's really federal. And some of the states are Bible states. So they adhere to everything written in Bible is the last word. You cannot deviate from anything. So in that state, there is a law that if you draw agreement which uses the word pi will have to be taken as the word given in Bible, and you cannot use any other mathematical approximation. Even now, as far as I know, that is the law in one of the states in US. It was certainly so some years ago. So we should not take anything for granted that this is so because we have been taught so.
Sir, the Bible basically just says pi is 3.
Are you sure it is 3?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think I saw a number file video about this where actually an amateur mathematician thought he had proved squaring the circle or something like that. And he was about to change the law in the state to enforce that pi was 3. Right? Because he had taken it as 3 for convenience, because I think that was the value in the Bible. I think something like that. Okay, 3.2, I see. Okay.
Bible writers are engineers, so they write 3.2. Maybe. So I'm at a loss exactly what is the value written in pi in the Bible, but all right. So those who have, you have another class, is it on the same Zoom thing, or I guess it will be different? Okay. So those who want to go and if you have another class, you can go. If you wanted to ask me some more questions, I am free for some time at least. So those who want to ask question or make some comment, they can stay. Others who have a class to attend can go. And in any case,
Sir,
yeah.
So yes, all of us have classes. I just had a question that so the handwritten notes that we made of what you said and whatever extra we added from our side, so can we share that out of
Yeah, I will share, and if on a given day after class I forget to share it by the evening, do remind me. One of you can name one of you as a coordinator, or multiple people reminding me was also okay with me. I won't get annoyed, don't worry. So I will try to do it by the evening. Yeah, go ahead.
So no, I didn't mean that. I meant that the handwritten notes that we make of your class, but like by ourselves, can we share that out of CMI to other people?
Good question. I really don't know. Maybe I'll inquire and find out and let you know. We will try to make it possible, but how to make it possible, I will check. Okay. All right. Okay. Maybe just write a mail to me so that I will not forget.
Okay.
Right.
Sir, is there any specific reference book, I mean the chief book, which will be followed in this course?
Not really. What I will do in class will be the main thing, but Rudin's analysis book is something which more or less conforms with what I do. So Rudin's book or Goldberg is another book given in your in CMI list of courses. These two, we can say you can read those. If you see something I am doing is different from what is written in the book, alert me. Okay, we can then debate and discuss what should be the one which we will follow.
Sure,
Sir, you
thank
mentioned Terence Tau's book earlier. Would you recommend that at all, or?
No, I will recommend that. I will recommend that also, because this, yeah. Terence
Thank
Tao
you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Really enjoyed the lecture. Yeah.
And we might be going slow, but that's why we have 3 sessions in a thing. We'll try to sort out whatever is there. Okay. So feel free to ask. Feel free always to ask me questions. And if we see we are doing very fast, we will see what to do later. But right now we will keep 3 sessions in a week. Okay. All right. Okay.
So the doubt I had regarding a field, the definition of a field.
Okay, what is the definition of a field?
No, so specifically because you said that multiplicative inverses exist for every number except for the 0.
Except for the additive identity, yes.
Yes, so that's a property that exists for all fields. So the additive identity won't have a multiplicative inverse.
Will not have multiplicative inverse. Yeah.
So even for other fields that will hold true.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I wanted to ask if we can keep our videos on in the next class, because this class seems like an interaction when we have our videos on. Hello, sir.